I'm Amanda, 34, and my daughter Grace is 12. In my family, I've always been the black sheep while my sister Stephanie was the golden child. When we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' home last year, I never imagined my own sister would humiliate my daughter so cruelly. The moment Grace ended up crying in that muddy puddle changed everything. I never thought I'd see the day when my quiet husband Michael would be the one to finally put my family in their place. Before I share how he turned our family upside down that day, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Growing up with Stephanie was never easy. She's 2 years older, always thinner, always prettier according to my parents' standards. From my earliest memories, my weight was a topic of discussion at our dinner table. "Amanda, do you really need another roll?" My mother would ask while piling extra mashed potatoes onto Stephanie's plate. By the time I was 10, I'd internalized the message that my body was somehow wrong. Stephanie capitalized on my insecurities. In middle school, she and her friends nicknamed me Piggy. When I came home crying, my father said I needed to develop thicker skin. My mother suggested I should try harder with my appearance if I wanted to be treated better. Neither ever told Stephanie to stop. High school was worse. Stephanie was homecoming queen, class president, and graduated with honors. I found solace in art and creative writing, but these achievements were dismissed as hobbies while Stephanie's accomplishments were celebrated with parties and expensive gifts. At my graduation dinner, my parents spent half the time discussing Stephanie's college scholarship despite the fact it was supposed to be my celebration. I met Michael despite the fact it was supposed to be my celebration. I met Michael during my sophomore year of college. He was different from anyone I'd ever known. Quiet but confident, and he seemed to genuinely see me. On our third date, when I hesitantly ordered a salad, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Get whatever you actually want to eat. I asked you out because I like who you are, not because of what you eat." I ordered a burger and fries, and it felt like the first free breath I'd taken in years. When Michael met my family at Thanksgiving that year, he witnessed the dynamic firsthand. Stephanie made a comment about how I'd finally found someone willing to date the chubby sister, and Michael calmly replied, "I found someone with a beautiful heart," which seems rare in this family. The silence that followed was deafening. That was the moment I knew he was the one. We married after graduation, despite my mother's suggestions to wait until you lose some weight for the photos. Our wedding day was small and perfect, though Stephanie managed to wear white despite being a bridesmaid. Michael just squeezed my hand and whispered, "She's just highlighting the difference between external and internal beauty." When Grace was born, I promised myself the cycle would end with me. I vowed my daughter would grow up knowing her worth wasn't measured by a scale or dress size. For the first years of her life, we limited visits with my family, creating our own traditions and surrounding ourselves with friends who valued kindness. As Grace entered elementary school, she was confident and vibrant. But around age 10, she started developing my body type, shorter and curvier than her peers. I recognized the familiar look of doubt in her eyes when she came home from school some days. We talked openly about body diversity and health beyond appearance, but I could see the societal messages were starting to seep in. My family didn't help. During a summer barbecue when Grace was 11, my mother commented on her second hot dog, "You need to watch that, sweetie. You don't want to end up struggling like your mom." I pulled Mom aside immediately, establishing that body comments were off limits. She acted offended, insisting she was just looking out for Grace's health. Stephanie was worse, constantly comparing Grace to her own daughters, Emma and Lily, who were naturally thin like their mother. The girls could lend Grace some fashion tips, she'd say, as though my daughter's clothing choices were somehow deficient because they draped differently on her body. As another Thanksgiving approached last year, I debated declining the invitation. Michael and I discussed creating our own tradition, just the three of us. But Grace actually wanted to go. "I haven't seen Grandpa in ages," she said, "and I want to show Emma and Lily my new art portfolio." Her optimism melted my resistance. Kids are resilient, I told myself. Plus, Michael had promised to stay vigilant and run interference if necessary. The morning of Thanksgiving dawned crisp and gray, with forecast calling for rain later. Grace was excited about her new outfit, a burgundy sweater dress with black leggings and ankle boots. She'd carefully styled her hair and even asked to use a little of my mascara. Looking at her, I felt a surge of protective love alongside a flutter of anxiety. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I told her and meant it with every fiber of my being. During the drive to my parents' suburban home, Michael kept the mood light, telling dad jokes that made Grace groan and giggle. But as we turned onto my parents' street lined with large homes decorated for the holiday, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. Michael reached over and squeezed my hand. "Remember," he said quietly while Grace was distracted by her phone, "we can leave anytime. Just give me the signal." I nodded, hoping it wouldn't come to that. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe, just maybe, my family would finally see the amazing people my husband and daughter were, and, by extension, accept me too. We pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 2 o'clock. Several cars were already parked along the street, my Aunt Catherine and Uncle Roger's SUV, my cousin Patricia's minivan, and of course, Stephanie's gleaming white luxury sedan positioned prominently in the circular driveway. Deep breaths, Michael whispered as he turned off the engine. Grace was already unbuckling her seatbelt, eager to head inside despite the first drops of rain beginning to fall. The front door opened before we reached it, my mother appearing in a perfectly pressed autumn-colored dress, her hair freshly styled. "There you are!" she exclaimed, hugging Grace first. "Oh my, haven't you grown?" Her eyes flickered over Grace's figure in a way that made my stomach clench. My father appeared behind her, martini already in hand despite the early hour. "The gang's all here now," he announced, giving Michael a hearty handshake and me a quick side hug. "Everyone's in the living room. Stephanie just got here too." The house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon, exactly as it had every Thanksgiving of my childhood. We made our way through the foyer into the expansive living room where relatives were gathered in small conversation clusters. My Aunt Catherine immediately approached, cooing over how mature Grace looked, while my cousin's children played a board game in the corner. And then there was Stephanie, making her entrance from the kitchen as though she'd been waiting for our arrival to make her appearance. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, her slender figure showcased in an expensive-looking cream cashmere sweater and tailored pants. Behind her trailed her husband James, a successful investment banker, carrying a bottle of wine that I was sure cost more than our entire Thanksgiving meal contribution. Amanda. Finally, Stephanie Eyre kissed near my cheeks. "I was just telling Mom I could help her fix up whatever you brought for the appetizer table." She glanced dismissively at the homemade cranberry brie puffs I'd spent hours preparing. "They don't need fixing," Michael said pleasantly but firmly. "Amanda's an excellent baker." Stephanie's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, I just know how busy you are with your what are you doing now? Still that part-time graphic design work?" Before I could respond, her daughters Emma and Lily, both willowy and dressed identically in plaid dresses, approached Grace. "Hi Grace," Emma said, her 13-year-old confidence evident. "Cute dress. Is it new?" Grace smiled genuinely. "Yeah, Mom helped me pick it out." "It's very bold," Lily added, exchanging a glance with her sister that made Grace's smile falter slightly. "Girls, why don't you show Grace the new game room downstairs?" James suggested, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrent. "Your grandfather had that ping-pong table installed." The girls headed downstairs while the adults migrated between the living room and kitchen. I offered to help with meal preparations and found myself stationed at the veggie tray, arranging carrots and celery while my mother and Stephanie handled the important dishes. "The turkey's coming along beautifully," my mother announced. "Stephanie brined it overnight using a special method she found in that cooking magazine." "Martha Stewart Living," Stephanie corrected. The issue with my interior design friend's home featured on the cover. I continued arranging vegetables, trying to focus on creating an attractive pattern rather than my rising irritation. "Amanda, you're putting too many carrots on one side," my mother commented, peering over my shoulder. "It looks lopsided." "Here, let me show you." Michael, entering with empty glasses for refills, caught my eye. He gave me our signal, a subtle touch of his ear, asking if I needed rescue. I shook my head slightly. It was just vegetables, not worth creating a scene over. The kitchen work continued with similar small cuts, comments about how I chopped onions inefficiently, questions about why Grace wasn't involved in competitive sports like Emma and Lily, remarks about Michael's sensible car compared to James' new luxury model. Through the kitchen window, I could see the backyard where the children had migrated. Despite the increasingly steady rain, they were playing some kind of tag game, with Grace clearly trying to keep up with her cousins who kept changing the rules whenever she got close to winning. "You might want to tell Grace to be careful," Stephanie said, following my gaze. "Those leggings look thin, and she's sliding around quite a bit. Would be a shame to rip them and have nothing else to wear." I bit my tongue. "She's fine. She's having fun, if you say so." Stephanie shrugged. "Emma and Lily know to bring backup outfits, but I suppose not everyone thinks ahead that way." My Uncle Roger wandered into the kitchen, refilling his scotch. "The girls look like they're having a blast out there, though that rain's really picking up. Gonna be puddles everywhere soon." "Maybe we should call them in," I suggested. "Oh, let 'em play," my mother waved dismissively. "Children need to burn off energy before sitting for dinner." Michael appeared at my side with a glass of wine. "Thought you might need this," he murmured. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I whispered back, though the tightness in my shoulders suggested otherwise. "Amanda," he said quietly, "we can still leave if this gets too much." "It's just one day," I replied. "We can get through this." But as I watched Grace through the window, trying so hard to fit in with cousins who clearly looked down on her, I wondered if I was making the right choice by staying. The pre-dinner socializing shifted to the formal living room as more relatives arrived. My cousin Thomas and his wife Beth brought their toddler twins, creating a momentary distraction as everyone cooed over the babies. I seized the opportunity to check on Grace, who had finally come inside with the other children, her hair damp from the rain. "Having fun?" I asked, helping her towel dry her hair in the downstairs bathroom. "Yeah, it's okay," she said, but her expression told a different story. "Emma and Lily kept changing the game though. That doesn't seem fair." She shrugged. "It's whatever. Can I show them my art portfolio now?" "I brought it like you suggested." My heart squeezed. Grace had spent weeks selecting her best drawings and paintings for this portfolio, hoping to impress her cousins and grandparents. "Of course, sweetheart, I'm sure they'll love it." We returned to the living room where Stephanie was holding court, describing her daughter's recent achievements. "Emma just made first chair violin," she was saying, "and Lily's coach says she's Olympic material in gymnastics. We're driving to regional competitions almost every weekend." "That's wonderful," my mother gushed. "Such talented girls." Grace approached with her portfolio clutched to her chest. "I brought some of my art to show everyone," she said, her voice smaller than usual. "Oh, how nice," my mother said distractedly. "Maybe after dinner, dear." "I'd love to see it now," Michael said, moving to Grace's side. "Why don't you show me and Grandpa?" My father, half listening while watching football on the muted TV, nodded vaguely. "What's that? Art? Sure, sure." Grace carefully opened her portfolio on the coffee table, revealing a detailed charcoal drawing of our backyard garden. "I did this one last month," she explained. "And this watercolor is from my art class." "That's really good, Grace," Michael said sincerely. My father glanced over. "Nice, kiddo. You get that from your mother. She used to doodle too." I winced at the dismissive characterization of both our artistic pursuits. Stephanie wandered over, wineglass in hand. "Oh, are we looking at school projects? Emma, Lily, come see what your cousin made." The girls approached with obvious reluctance. Emma gave the artwork a cursory glance. "Cool. Hey, Mom, can we have the iPad to show Grace our gymnastics videos?" "Art is a nice hobby," Stephanie said with a condescending tone that suggested it was nothing more. Emma used to enjoy coloring too before she got serious about her violin. Grace's face fell slightly, but she continued showing her portfolio. "This one won first place in the school art show," she said, pointing to a mixed media piece that had taken her weeks to complete. "First place at your school?" Lily asked. "How many kids entered?" Before Grace could answer, my Aunt Catherine called from across the room. "Stephanie, we need a family photo before dinner. Bring the girls." The family photo session became yet another exercise in subtle exclusion. My mother arranged everyone on and around the living room sofa, positioning Stephanie's family front and center, with my father beside them. Michael, Grace, and I were directed to stand at the far edge. "Amanda, maybe angle yourself a bit more." "Yes, that's better," my mother said, clearly trying to minimize my appearance in the frame. "Actually," Michael said pleasantly but firmly, "why don't Grace and I stand next to her grandfather? Since we don't visit as often, it would be nice to have a good photo with him." My mother hesitated, then reluctantly rearranged. I caught Stephanie whispering something to our mother that made them both glance at Grace with barely concealed disapproval. As we dispersed after photos, I overheard Stephanie in the hallway with our mother. "It's really a shame Amanda doesn't help Grace dress more appropriately for her body type," Stephanie was saying. "Those leggings do nothing for her. And that hair, so frizzy after being in the rain." "I know," my mother sighed. "I've tried to suggest some better styles, but you know your sister. Always been sensitive about these things." And the girls clearly taking after her in size. I froze in the hallway, anger and hurt washing over me in equal measure. Michael, who had heard too, placed a steady hand on my back. "Say the word," he whispered. "We can leave right now." I shook my head, blinking back tears. It would just confirm everything they think about me, that I'm too sensitive, that I can't handle family gatherings. Or it would show Grace that you don't have to tolerate people treating you badly, even if they're family, he countered. Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed through the house. "Weather alert says we're in for a real downpour. Better bring in anything you don't want soaked from the backyard." I glanced out the window to see the sky had darkened considerably, the earlier drizzle now a steady rain that drummed against the glass. The backyard, visible through the large windows, showed growing puddles forming on the patio and lawn, particularly a large one near the steps leading from the back door. "Kids, inside, all of you," my mother called. "Dinner's almost ready anyway." As the children trooped in from various parts of the house, I tried to push aside my hurt and focus on getting through the meal. "Just a few more hours," I told myself. "We can do this." But the atmosphere had grown as heavy as the clouds outside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was yet to come. "Dinner in 15 minutes, my mother announced from the kitchen. "Grace, would you help set the table?" Grace, eager to be useful, jumped up from where she'd been sitting quietly with her art portfolio. "Sure, Grandma." I followed her into the dining room, wanting to help but also to provide some buffer between my daughter and potential criticism. The formal dining table had been extended to its full length, with my mother's best china and crystal already arranged at each place setting. "The silverware goes like this." I showed Grace arranging a place setting. "Fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right." She nodded, carefully mimicking my example as she moved around the table. I noticed her taking extra care, her brow furrowed in concentration as she worked to get everything perfect. We were nearly finished when Stephanie swept in, champagne flute in hand. "Oh, you're doing it that way," she said, eyeing Grace's arrangement. "Mom usually puts the water glasses at the top right, not left." Grace looked stricken. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "It's fine," I interjected. "The placement is correct. The glasses can go either way." Stephanie made a small noise of disagreement. "Well, in formal dining etiquette, which is what Mom prefers, there is a correct placement." She reached over and began rearranging Grace's carefully positioned glasses. "I was just trying to help," Grace said quietly. "Of course you were, sweetie," Stephanie said with faux sweetness. "Not everyone learns proper table setting." I made sure Emma and Lily knew by the time they were 8. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that creating a scene would only make things worse for Grace. "The table looks beautiful," I told my daughter. "Thank you for helping." My mother appeared in the doorway. "Everyone start making your way to the table. James is carving the turkey now." The family began filtering in from the living room, claiming seats at the long table. Predictably, my parents took the heads of the table, with Stephanie, James, and their daughters positioned in places of honor near my father. Michael, Grace, and I ended up on the far side between my Aunt Catherine and Cousin Thomas's family. As everyone settled, my father stood to say grace, followed by his traditional Thanksgiving toast highlighting the family's accomplishments for the year. Stephanie's promotions and the girls' achievements featured prominently. When he mentioned that Amanda and her family joined us again this year, it felt like an afterthought. The platters began circulating, loaded with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and all the traditional sides. When the cranberry sauce-eyed maid reached Stephanie, she took a tiny spoonful with visible reluctance. "Is this the canned kind?" or she let the question hang. "I made it from scratch," I replied. "It's Grandma Wilson's recipe." "Oh, brave of you to attempt that. It's quite chunky, isn't it?" Conversation flowed around the table, mostly dominated by my father and uncle discussing politics and my mother and Stephanie exchanging stories about their social circles. Grace ate quietly, occasionally glancing at her cousins who were whispering and giggling together. "Grace, would you pass the rolls to Emma and Lily?" my mother asked. As Grace reached for the basket, she accidentally knocked over Lily's water glass. The water spread quickly across the white tablecloth. "Oh!" Lily exclaimed, jumping back. "I'm so sorry," Grace said, mortified, grabbing her napkin to soak up the spill. "It's just water," Michael said calmly. "No harm done." But Stephanie was already on her feet. "Lily, is your dress wet? Stand up, let me see." "It's fine, Mom," Lily said, though she shot Grace an annoyed look. "You need to be more careful," Stephanie said to Grace. "These linens are antique." "I said I was sorry," Grace repeated, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. My mother swooped in with extra napkins. "Let's just clean this up and continue our lovely dinner, shall we?" The incident seemed to pass, but the atmosphere had shifted. Stephanie kept shooting disapproving glances at Grace, who had withdrawn into herself, taking smaller bites and barely looking up from her plate. As dinner concluded, my mother suggested, "Why don't we have dessert in about an hour? The kids might want to stretch their legs a bit before pie." "It's raining pretty hard," I pointed out. "Just on the covered patio then," she replied. "They don't need to go into the yard." The children were excused, and the adults remained at the table, moving on to coffee and more wine. Michael kept a protective eye on Grace, as she reluctantly followed her cousins toward the kitchen that led to the back patio. I was half listening to my aunt's story about her recent cruise when I heard raised voices from the kitchen. I exchanged a glance with Michael and stood up to investigate. In the kitchen, I found Stephanie confronting Grace, who was backed against the counter. Emma and Lily stood nearby, identical expressions of smug satisfaction on their faces. "What's going on?" I asked, moving to Grace's side. "Your daughter just shoved Emma while they were walking through the doorway," Stephanie said accusingly. "I didn't," Grace protested. "We bumped into each other because the doorway is narrow." "I already said sorry." "She did it on purpose, Mom," Emma insisted. "She's been weird all day because we didn't like her drawings." "That's not true." Grace's voice cracked. I put an arm around Grace's shoulders. "I'm sure it was just an accident. The doorway is narrow and everyone's been moving around a lot." Stephanie's eyes narrowed. "Of course you'd take her side. You always make excuses for her behavior, just like our parents did for you." "Excuse me." I felt heat rising in my face. You heard me, Stephanie continued, her voice rising. You've always been jealous of me, and now your daughter is jealous of mine. It's pathetic, really. By this point, Michael had appeared in the doorway, along with several other family members drawn by the escalating voices. Maybe we should all take a moment to calm down, Michael suggested evenly. Oh, here comes Prince Charming to the rescue, Stephanie sneered. You know, it's really a disservice, the way you two coddle her. She gestured toward Grace. She's going to have a rude awakening in the real world when people aren't obligated to pretend she's special. That's enough, I said firmly, feeling Grace trembling under my arm. Mom, can we go outside now? Lily asked, clearly enjoying the drama. Fine, Stephanie snapped, but stay on the patio because of the rain. The girls headed toward the back door, Grace hanging back reluctantly. Go on, I told her gently. Just stay under the covered area. We'll have dessert soon and then head home. Grace nodded and followed her cousins, though the distance between them was noticeable. I turned back to Stephanie. You had no right to speak to Grace that way. Oh, please, she scoffed. You're so sensitive. This is why Grace is the way she is. You've taught her to play the victim just like you always have. Before I could respond, we heard a commotion from the patio, raised voices, then a splash, and a cry that I immediately recognized as Grace's. I rushed toward the back door, Michael right behind me. What I saw made my blood run cold. Grace was lying in a large, muddy puddle at the bottom of the patio steps, completely soaked and covered in mud. Her new burgundy dress was ruined, her hair plastered to her face with dirty water. Stephanie stood at the top of the steps, Emma and Lily beside her, all three with expressions that made it clear this was no accident. Now you're just like your mother, you dirty pig. Stephanie's words hung in the air as Grace began to sob. Several relatives had gathered behind us, and I heard muffled laughter from someone. My Uncle Roger, I thought. Others simply looked away uncomfortably. I rushed down the steps to Grace, kneeling beside her despite the mud. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. She pushed me, Mom. Grace sobbed. Aunt Stephanie pushed me when I tried to come back inside. I looked up at my sister in disbelief. You pushed her? Your own niece? She's 12 years old, Stephanie. Stephanie rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. She slipped. And that pig comment was just a joke. She knows we were just playing around. Grace's sobs intensified, her whole body shaking as I tried to help her up from the muddy puddle. And that's when I felt Michael's presence beside us. I looked up to see an expression on my husband's face I'd rarely witnessed before. Calm fury, controlled but unmistakable. What did you just do to my daughter? He asked Stephanie, his voice quiet but carrying across the suddenly silent patio. Michael helped Grace to her feet with gentle hands, then stripped off his clean blue dress shirt, leaving him in just his white undershirt. He wrapped the shirt around Grace's shoulders like a protective shield. Are you hurt anywhere? He asked her softly. When she shook her head through her tears, he nodded. Good. Let's get you inside where it's warm. But instead of leading Grace through the gauntlet of relatives still gathered at the back door, he guided her toward the side gate. Amanda, would you get our coats in Grace's bag, please? We're leaving. His calm demeanor seemed to break the frozen tableau. Stephanie let out a dramatic sigh. Oh, come on. It was just a little mud. Everyone's overreacting. Tell them, Mom. My mother, who had finally made her way to the back door, looked uncomfortable. It does seem like an accident that got out of hand. Grace, dear, let's get you cleaned up and changed. I'm sure I have something you can borrow. It wasn't an accident, Michael said, his voice still measured, but with steel underneath. And we're not staying. He turned to address the gathered family members directly. For years, I've watched how you treat my wife and daughter. The constant comments about their bodies, the dismissal of their accomplishments, the not-so-subtle comparisons. I've respected Amanda's wish to maintain relationships with her family despite it all. But today, you've crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. A heavy silence fell over the patio. Even the rain seemed to soften in deference to Michael's words. Michael, my father began awkwardly. No one meant any harm. No harm. Michael's eyebrow raised. Your grown daughter just pushed your 12-year-old granddaughter into a muddy puddle and called her a pig. The rest of you either laughed or looked away. Tell me again how no harm was intended. Stephanie's face had gone from smug to flushed. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. It was a joke that Grace is too sensitive to handle, just like her mother. A joke is funny to everyone involved, Michael replied evenly. What you did was bullying, plain and simple. And it's clearly a family pattern that's been normalized for far too long. I returned with our coats and Grace's bag, my heart pounding with shame, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. Michael was saying all the things I'd wanted to say for years but never found the courage to voice. Amanda, my mother implored, surely you understand we're just trying to have a nice family Thanksgiving. Accidents happen, feelings get hurt, but we move past it. That's what family does. I looked at my daughter, still shivering despite Michael's shirt around her shoulders, then at my sister who showed no remorse, and finally at my parents who were more concerned with saving their holiday than protecting their granddaughter. "No, Mom," I said, finding my voice at last. "What families should do is protect each other, not tear each other down. What happened to Grace wasn't an accident. And it wasn't isolated. It's just the most visible example of how this family has always treated us. Us against them, as always," Stephanie muttered. "Nothing's changed since we were kids." "You're right about that," I agreed. "And that's the problem. You're still the golden child who can do no wrong. And I'm still expected to accept whatever scraps of approval you all deign to throw my way. But I won't let Grace grow up thinking that's what she deserves too." Michael placed his hand gently on Grace's shoulder. "We're going home now. Grace needs to get warm and dry." "But dessert," my mother protested weakly. "We'll have to proceed without us," Michael finished. "Amanda, are you ready?" I nodded, feeling strangely calm despite the tension crackling in the air. We turned to leave through the side gate, bypassing the need to walk back through the house. "This is ridiculous," Stephanie called after us. "You're ruining Thanksgiving over a little mud." Michael stopped and turned back one last time. "No, Stephanie. You ruined it when you decided to hurt a child to make yourself feel powerful. I sincerely hope someday you realize what you've lost today." We walked to our car in silence, the rain still falling steadily around us. I helped Grace into the back seat, where she curled up with her wet dress still clinging to her. Michael started the engine and turned the heat on full blast before anyone spoke. "I'm sorry about your shirt," Grace finally whispered to Michael, looking at the now muddy dress shirt she still clutched around herself. "It's just a shirt," he replied gently. "You're what matters." As we pulled away from my parents' house, I glanced back to see several figures still standing on the porch, watching us leave. No one had come out to apologize or try to stop us. Somehow, that told me everything I needed to know about where we stood with my family. The drive home was quiet, with only the sound of the rain against the windshield and the occasional sniffle from Grace in the back seat. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at my sister, disappointment in my parents, shame at having subjected Grace to that environment, and an unexpected sense of relief that we'd finally broken free. When we were about halfway home, my phone began buzzing with text notifications. I glanced down to see messages from my mother, my father, and even my Aunt Catherine. I turned the phone face down on my lap, unwilling to deal with their perspectives just yet. "Are you okay?" Michael asked quietly. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think I will be." In the rearview mirror, I could see Grace's reflection. Despite the muddy clothes and tear-streaked face, there was something else in her expression. A questioning look, as if she was re-evaluating everything she thought she knew about family dynamics and where she fit into them. As painful as today had been, perhaps it was also the beginning of something important, a chance to break a cycle that had damaged me for decades and threatened to do the same to my daughter. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family alongside a husband who refused to let them treat us as less than. And most importantly, Grace had witnessed it all. That, at least, felt like something to be thankful for. The moment we arrived home, Michael went straight to run a hot bath for Grace while I helped her out of her mud-soaked clothes. Despite the heating in the car, she was still shivering, more from emotional shock than cold, I suspected. "I'm sorry about your dress," I told her as I carefully placed it in the laundry sink to soak. "We can try to clean it, but if it's ruined, we'll get you a new one." Grace looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "It's not about the dress, Mom." "I know, sweetheart." I smoothed back her damp hair. "What Aunt Stephanie did was cruel and inexcusable. Why does she hate us so much?" Grace's question cut straight to my heart. I considered sugarcoating my answer, but after what had happened, Grace deserved honesty. "I don't think she hates us, exactly. I think she's deeply insecure, and putting others down makes her feel better about herself. It's a pattern that started when we were children. But why didn't Grandma and Grandpa stop her? They just stood there." That question was harder to answer. They've always had a blind spot when it comes to Stephanie. They should have protected me when we were growing up, and they should have protected you today. Their failure to do that says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. The bath ready, I left Grace to soak while I changed out of my own Thanksgiving outfit. My phone continued to buzz with notifications. Finally, I steeled myself and looked at the messages. From Mom: "Amanda, you're overreacting. Please come back so we can talk about this like adults." From Dad: "Your mother's upset. Call when you've calmed down." From Aunt Catherine: "Such a shame about dinner. Stephanie says Grace was being difficult all day. Hope you'll patch things up soon." And finally, from Stephanie herself: "Way to ruin Thanksgiving with your drama. Mom's crying because you stormed out over nothing. You always have to make everything about you, don't you?" My hands shook with anger as I read her message. After everything that had happened, she was still twisting the narrative, still casting herself as the victim while I was the villain. It was the same script we'd been following since childhood, and I was sick of my assigned role. Before I could think better of it, I hit the call button on Stephanie's contact. She answered on the second ring. "Finally come to your senses?" Her voice stripped with condescension. "Actually, I called to tell you that what you did today was unforgivable," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You pushed a child, your niece, into the mud and called her a pig in front of the entire family." "Oh, please," she slipped. "And the pig comment was just a joke. We both know that's not true. And even if it were jokes that hurt people aren't jokes, they're just cruelty with a coward's excuse attached." "Excuse me." Stephanie's voice rose in pitch. "You heard me. I'm not doing this anymore, Stephanie. The constant put-downs, the body shaming, using your children to bully mine, it stops today. You're being ridiculous." "No. What's ridiculous is that I've allowed this to continue for so long." Words poured out of me, decades of suppressed feelings finally finding voice. "When we were kids, you called me Piggy until I cried myself to sleep. You accidentally ripped my prom dress because you couldn't stand that someone had asked me instead of you. You wore white to my wedding, and now you're trying to do the same thing to my daughter." Ancient history, Stephanie scoffed. "And completely exaggerated." "It's not exaggerated to Grace, who's currently washing mud out of her hair because her aunt physically pushed her. Do you have any idea what kind of person does that to a child?" There was a pause before Stephanie responded, her voice colder. "If you're so perfect, why did you let Michael fight your battles today? Still can't stand up for yourself after all these years? The fact that you see defending a child as fighting battles says everything about you. And for the record, Michael didn't step in because I couldn't handle it. He stepped in because that's what people who love each other do. They protect each other." From the bathroom doorway, I suddenly realized Grace was standing there in her robe, listening. Her eyes were wide, taking in every word of the conversation. "Well, enjoy your sad little Thanksgiving with your sad little family," Stephanie sneered. "Meanwhile, we'll be having dessert with people who know how to take a joke." "Enjoy your pie," I replied. "I'm blocking your number after this call. If you ever want to have a relationship with me or Grace again, you'll need to offer a genuine apology and make real changes. Until then, stay away from us." I ended the call before she could respond and immediately blocked her number. Then I did the same for my parents, whose enabling was just as harmful in its way. Grace approached slowly. "Did you really just block Grandma and Grandpa?" "For now," I said, suddenly uncertain. Had I gone too far? "I think we all need some space to think about what happened today." Michael appeared in the hallway, having changed into comfortable clothes. "Everything okay? I heard you on the phone." "I just told Stephanie exactly what I think of her behavior," I admitted. "And I blocked her. And my parents." Instead of looking shocked, Michael simply nodded. "It's about time." "But they're still family," Grace said quietly. Michael came over and crouched down to meet Grace at eye level. "Family is supposed to make you feel safe and loved. People who deliberately hurt you don't deserve access to you, even if they share your DNA." Grace considered this. "So what happens now? No more Thanksgiving or Christmas with them ever?" "I don't know, honey," I answered honestly. "That depends on whether they can recognize what they did wrong and make real changes. But what I do know is that we're not going to pretend everything's fine when it isn't." "I'm kinda hungry," Grace admitted. "We didn't really get to eat much." Michael smiled. "Well, we have all the ingredients for a proper Thanksgiving dinner. What do you say we make our own?" And so we did. Still in our comfortable clothes, we worked together in the kitchen, preparing a simplified version of the traditional meal. Michael handled the turkey breast while Grace and I worked on mashed potatoes and vegetables. We played music, shared stories, and gradually, the tension from earlier began to dissolve. By the time we sat down to our improvised Thanksgiving dinner, the mood had lightened considerably. We used our everyday dishes instead of fancy china, served sparkling cider in mismatched glasses, and toasted to family, the one we choose. After dinner, we moved to the living room and played board games, something we'd never been able to do at my parents' house where post-dinner activities were strictly regulated. Grace laughed genuinely for the first time that day when Michael dramatically lost at Monopoly. Later that evening, my phone lit up with a notification from a name that surprised me, my cousin Patricia. "Just wanted to check if Grace is okay," her message read. What Stephanie did today was awful. No one knew what to say, but that's no excuse for not speaking up. "I'm sorry." I showed the message to Michael. "Should I respond?" "That's up to you," he said, "but it sounds sincere." I typed back, "Grace is okay now. Thank you for checking and for acknowledging what happened." Patricia's response came quickly. "I should have said something in the moment. My daughter Zoe told me she's seen Stephanie's girls be mean to Grace before at family gatherings but was afraid to say anything. If you're open to it, maybe Zoe and Grace could get together sometime outside of family events." This unexpected connection brought tears to my eyes. Even amid the fracturing of some family relationships, new ones were potentially forming. Over the next few days, more messages trickled in from extended family members, some supportive, others less so. My parents left increasingly frustrated voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. I deleted them without responding. But the most surprising development came a week after Thanksgiving when I opened our front door to find Stephanie standing on the porch, alone and looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "What are you doing here?" I asked, making no move to invite her in. "I came to talk," she said. "Can I come in?" "No," I replied firmly. "Say what you came to say from there." She looked taken aback, probably unused to being denied anything she wanted. "Fine. I came to apologize, I guess." "You guess," Stephanie sighed. "Look, maybe I was out of line with Grace. I shouldn't have pushed her. That's not an apology. That's a partial admission with a built-in excuse. What do you want from me, Amanda?" She snapped, her facade cracking. "To grovel? To admit I've been terrible to you our whole lives? Is that what you need to hear?" "I don't need to hear anything from you," I said truthfully. "I didn't ask you to come here. But if you want any relationship with me or my daughter in the future, then yes, you need to acknowledge the pattern of behavior, not just the most recent incident." She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. "You've changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." As Stephanie drove away, I felt neither triumph nor regret, just a quiet certainty that I was finally setting the boundaries I should have established long ago. The real surprise came a month later in the form of a letter, an actual handwritten letter, from Stephanie. I read it alone first, bracing for more manipulation or half-hearted apologies. Instead, I found something I'd never expected: vulnerability. "I've been seeing a therapist since Thanksgiving," she wrote. "She's helping me recognize patterns I didn't want to see. The truth is, I've always been jealous of you, of your creativity, your genuine nature, and especially the way Michael loves you unconditionally. Our parents put so much pressure on me to be perfect that I thought tearing you down was the only way to stay on top. It's not an excuse, but maybe it helps explain why I've been so awful. I'm truly sorry for hurting Grace. If you're willing, I'd like to meet for coffee sometime. Just us." I sat with the letter for several days before showing it to Michael and discussing whether to respond. Eventually, I decided to take a cautious step forward. We arranged to meet at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. Walking in, I spotted Stephanie already at a table, looking smaller somehow without her usual entourage of admirers. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Your letter surprised me," I admitted. "It surprised me too, in a way," she replied with unexpected honesty. "Writing it forced me to confront things I've been avoiding for decades." What followed was the most genuine conversation we'd ever had. Stephanie spoke about the crushing expectations our parents had placed on her, while I shared how their dismissal had shaped my self-worth. We cried, we laughed uncomfortably, and, for the first time, we truly saw each other. "I don't expect forgiveness right away," Stephanie said as we prepared to leave, "but I'd like the chance to be a better sister and a better Auntie Grace." "That will take time," I told her. "And actions, not just words." She nodded. "I know. I'm willing to put in the work if you're willing to leave the door open, even just a crack." As winter turned to spring, small steps were taken. Stephanie and I met occasionally for coffee. She sent Grace a thoughtful birthday gift with a sincere apology note. My parents remained more resistant to change, still insisting we should move past the Thanksgiving incident without addressing the underlying issues. But even they began to realize that the old dynamics were permanently altered. 6 months after that disastrous Thanksgiving, we agreed to a small family gathering, just my parents, Stephanie and her family, and us at a neutral restaurant rather than anyone's home. The atmosphere was tentative, conversations careful, but no hurtful comments were made. Grace received genuine compliments on her latest art project from both her grandparents and, most surprisingly, from Emma and Lily, who seemed to be following their mother's lead in attempting reconciliation. It wasn't perfect, and I maintained firm boundaries, but it was a beginning. A chance to redefine what family could mean for all of us. The journey toward healing didn't follow a straight line. There were setbacks along the way, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, times when I questioned whether reconciliation was truly possible. But through it all, 3 things remained constant: Michael's unwavering support, Grace's remarkable resilience, and my growing determination to break generational cycles of hurt. 2 weeks after the Thanksgiving incident, I started therapy to address the family trauma I'd carried for decades. My therapist helped me recognize how deeply I'd internalized messages about my worth being tied to my appearance and achievements. More importantly, she helped me develop tools to challenge those beliefs and establish healthier boundaries. "The goal isn't to erase your past," she explained during one particularly emotional session. "It's to ensure that your past doesn't dictate your future or Grace's." Grace, meanwhile, was processing her own experience of that day. Initially, she had nightmares about falling and being laughed at. But as we talked openly about what happened and why, she began to frame the incident not as a reflection of her worth, but as an example of how hurt people sometimes hurt others. Aunt Stephanie was really mean, she observed one evening as we baked cookies together. But I think she must be really sad inside to act like that. Her insight took my breath away. At 12, she was developing the emotional intelligence I'd struggled to find well into adulthood. Michael suggested we create new family traditions to replace the ones that had caused so much anxiety. Instead of enduring formal dinners where appearances mattered more than connection, we started family adventure Sundays where we explored new places together. Sometimes these were elaborate outings to museums or hiking trails. Other times, they were as simple as trying a new recipe or a board game at home. As Christmas approached, we made another significant change, declining my parents' invitation and instead booking a cozy cabin in the mountains for just the three of us. "Are you sure?" Michael asked as I sent the polite but firm email declining their invitation. "I know this is a big step." "I'm sure," I replied. "Maybe someday we'll be ready to celebrate holidays together again, but right now, we need to prioritize creating positive memories for Grace." Our Christmas in the mountains became one of my favorite memories, building snowmen, drinking hot chocolate by the fire, exchanging thoughtful gifts without the pressure of performance or comparison. Grace seemed lighter somehow, laughing more freely than she had in months. In January, an unexpected letter arrived from my father. Unlike my mother's messages, which continued to demand we put the past behind us without acknowledgement of harm, my father's letter showed the first glimmers of genuine reflection. "I've been thinking about Thanksgiving," he wrote, "and about many moments before that. I didn't protect you when you were a child, and I didn't protect Grace either. I don't know if I can change at my age, but I want you to know I see now that I failed you in important ways." It wasn't a complete reckoning, but it was a start. I called him the next day, and we had the first honest conversation of my adult life. He cried when I described how it felt to grow up feeling like the family disappointment. "I never meant to make you feel that way," he said. "I thought pushing you would make you stronger." "It didn't make me stronger," I told him. "It made me doubt my worth. And that's what I'm working to change now for myself and for Grace." Stephanie's journey toward insight continued as well, though not without stumbles. After our coffee shop meeting, she made genuine efforts to change her behavior. She called occasionally, asking about Grace's art and my graphic design work with sincere interest. When she slipped into old patterns, making an offhand comment about my choice of jeans at one get-together, she caught herself and apologized without prompting. Most significantly, she began addressing her daughter's behavior. Emma and Lily had clearly learned their bullying tactics from watching their mother, and changing those ingrained habits wasn't easy. But I witnessed Stephanie gently correcting Lily when she made a dismissive comment about another girl's appearance, explaining why such remarks were harmful. By spring, we felt ready to attempt a small family gathering. We chose a neutral location, a restaurant with private dining rooms, and established clear expectations beforehand. The meal wasn't without awkward moments, but for the first time in my memory, no one left in tears. Grace approached her cousins cautiously at first. Their interaction was stilted, the Thanksgiving incident hanging unspoken between them. But when Grace mentioned her upcoming art show at school, Emma surprised everyone by asking genuine questions about her techniques. By dessert, the girls were showing each other photos on their phones and even laughing together. "They're not so bad when they're not being mean," Grace observed on the drive home. "People can change," Michael said, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. "Especially when they realize what they stand to lose if they don't." As summer approached, we received an invitation that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. My parents wanted to rent a beach house for a week and have the entire family stay together. My initial reaction was resistance, but after discussing it with Michael and Grace, we decided to accept with conditions. We would stay in a nearby hotel rather than in the shared house, giving us space to retreat if needed, and we would commit to only 3 days rather than the full week. Those 3 days at the beach became a turning point. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that threatened to resurface, but there were also new connections forming. My father taught Grace to fish off the pier, listening attentively as she shared her dreams of becoming an artist. My mother, though still prone to criticism, made visible efforts to compliment rather than critique. And Stephanie, in perhaps the most meaningful gesture of all, pulled me aside on our last evening to say, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see how much I was hurting you. Thank you for giving me the chance to do better." As we drove home from that beach trip, I reflected on the journey of the past 8 months. The family I had now wasn't perfect. There were still wounds being healed, trust being rebuilt, boundaries being tested and reinforced, but it was more authentic than the facade we had maintained for decades. More importantly, Grace was learning powerful lessons about self-worth and healthy relationships that had taken me far too long to understand, that love shouldn't be conditional, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, and that sometimes the people who should love you the most need the clearest boundaries. "Mom?" Grace's voice broke into my thoughts from the back seat. I'm kinda glad Aunt Stephanie pushed me into that puddle last Thanksgiving. I turned to look at her, startled. You are? She nodded thoughtfully. If it hadn't happened, everything would still be the same. We'd still be pretending everything was okay when it wasn't, and I might have grown up thinking that's just how families are supposed to be. Michael reached over to squeeze my hand as I blinked back tears. Out of the most painful moment of our family history had come the most valuable lesson, that real family isn't about maintaining appearances or enduring mistreatment for the sake of tradition. It's about protecting each other, speaking truth even when it's difficult, and being willing to grow and change together. That muddy Thanksgiving had been a breaking point, but also a breakthrough. The moment we stopped accepting scraps of conditional affection and demanded the respect and love we deserved. And while the path forward wasn't always smooth, it was authentic in a way our family relationships had never been before. So, if you're watching this and recognizing patterns from your own family, remember that you deserve better than to be someone else's emotional punching bag. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who need the opportunity to recognize their own harmful behaviors. Have you ever had to stand up to toxic family members? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And, if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Remember, sometimes the most important family traditions are the harmful ones we choose to break. Thank you for watching, and remember that you are worthy of respect and genuine love no matter what anyone else might say.